Group STEM Summit panel titled Closing the Gap from Classroom to Industry. I think probably everyone here knows the United States lags behind the rest of the world in STEM, as we've talked about here earlier. One of the challenges is how are we going to be able to change that? How are we addressing the problem? What kind of solutions are there to address the problem? This first Alliant Group Summit is designed to basically have a discussion, solution-oriented discussion about just that very topic. The ways that we can have a brighter future, better economy, all of those things certainly are intertwined, and that's why it's a very important topic to have. You live this life as you teach, and so we need to make sure that what is talked about can actually become reality, especially those things that really work. We have a wonderful panel. I want to introduce them to you. First chair here to my left here, William Harris is the CEO of Space Center Houston. Next to him is former Congressman Rick White, also the former CEO of TechNet and an Alliant Group Strategic Advisory Board member. Deirdre Ricketts, who you've met, is the 2019 Alliant Group Houston ISD Elementary Science Teacher Award winner and Alliant Group Director of STEAM Education. Dr. Calvin Mackey is the founder of and CEO of STEM NOLA. You're going to hear more about that. It's an amazing program in New Orleans in that area. Dr. Juliet Breeze is the CEO of Next Level Urgent Care and Chair of the Board of Junior Achievement Southeast Texas Chapter. Chuck Wilson is the Executive Director of the National Systems Contractors Association. Give them all a big round of applause, please.
You're so cute.
So you should know that we're streaming this panel discussion as well, live on social media. And we'll be taking at least one question from someone on social media. So this means that sometimes if you think what happens at Alliant Group stays, it's not the case today. So we have to be on our best behavior, and I think that's easy for us to do. So one of the panel discussions here, we've broken down into different topics, and we've talked about this in terms of the discussion that we're going to have here, the importance of STEM education for our economy. That's the first topic, the importance of STEM education for our economy. I think we know that the challenges are great. How do you incorporate STEM education in a way that it turns into something that is beneficial for our economy? How early do you start? What are the challenges in making that happen?
Well, I'll jump in. Well, I think all kids are natural-born scientists. They're all curious. They're all inquisitive. And we really need to sustain that and really nurture that. And one way is finding what their interests are. So I can speak for Space Center Houston. All kids love exploration. I mean, that's something that's kind of universally appealing. And so what we try to do is engender that and sustain it, no matter what your age, whether you're a kid who's 3 years old or 80 years old. And so it's really about lifelong learning and following your passion. So often we have people ask us, or kids who come to the Space Center and say, how do I become an astronaut? And what an astronaut will say to you is, follow your passion. If you're interested in English literature, follow English literature, pursue that, and you can find a connection to space exploration in some way. And it's really about pursuing that path, because you can contribute some way to exploration. But specific to the question, STEM is such an opportunity. We are now in an information technological society, and the jobs in Houston are in those arenas. That's the greatest growth opportunity. So if you can present that to your youth, find a way to connect them around their passions to STEM topics, that's one of the best things that you can do.
And I guess I would say also, it's really, the resources are there to teach these people, but what we may have to make sure is that Americans take advantage of them. If you talk to tech people in Silicon Valley, they hire lots of technical people, a lot of them from overseas, because our kids, and it's probably a good thing in many ways, have lots of opportunities. They're at one path out of to a better life isn't necessarily through STEM. So it's important to make sure our kids know that they can do this and seek out the opportunities that are there and take those opportunities to them. But it's not simply a matter of having the resources to teach them. You got to make sure these kids are motivated to do it.
Motivating them to do it is the real key, because there's so many different things out there getting their attention, the shiny objects, if you will, that sometimes aren't the most beneficial for their lives. So that's a big challenge to get them focused on the right kind of shiny object, right, doctor?
That's absolutely right. And actually, I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for what you do for our country. I'm a big believer that educators are just, the most important people around. And what I think is that the more relevant we can make the education of our children, the more excited they will get because they'll see the connection between what's happening in the classroom and what's happening in their world around them. And so I think that things that I'm sure Dr. Mackey will have some comments to jump in on this, but any programs that you put in place where you can connect the kids and get them excited because they see that, whatever they're learning in the classroom really does apply to what they're seeing adults and their parents and other people in the community doing. That's just, I think the key. So I just tossed you a softball.
You threw me the ball.
Yeah.
But what I want to say is that the problem that's facing us isn't new. We're in the midst of a fourth industrial revolution. First industrial revolution was when the creation of steam and locomotives, right? And we had a challenge of getting people from an agriculture society into an industrial society. And we, in 1890 colleges, 1870s, the Mayoral Act created land grant colleges so they can train certain people to participate in this industrial revolution. The second industrial revolution was the advent of electricity. And we had the same challenge. How do we get more people to participate? Henry Ford had a challenge, and Post, all these guys that had these big assembly lines had to train people to participate. The third industrial revolution was the computer around the 60s and the 70s, and we lost secretaries and we lost people who know how to type because the computer was invented. But now we're in a fourth industrial revolution, which is like the Internet of Things, right? Sensors, artificial intelligence, robotics, mechanization of processes, and all of these devices have to talk to everybody. The only difference in those three industrial revolutions was that we always trained people to do the work, and we had enough people, primarily white males. The challenge now is that we need everybody. And now we have to talk about STEM for all, education for all, training for all. We got to make sure that the resources that the congressman is talking about are applied equally to communities that otherwise have never had access to those type of resources and the teaching that other communities have gotten. And it starts, again, Mr. Harris said, we're talking about cradle to career, but we want to talk about workforce development without talking about the cradle. We have to meet the kids where they are and begin to expose them at the beginning. And just in closing, in this little comment, and we can understand this because we're in Texas, we make sure that every black and brown boy touches a football before the age of 4, and no one questions that. As a matter of fact, if we stop giving them the football, people will probably get mad. And we got like 4,000 universities with college basketballs and football teams, and they never need a black or brown boy to play football or basketball. And we got a big $1 billion athletic industry, and they never lack somebody to pick up that football and basketball and run with it. So we have to make sure, just like that football, we're putting the STEM in the hands of every kid coming out of their mother's womb. And that's how we started from the cradle and make sure we got what we need at the end.
Mr. Wilson, I know we were talking earlier about how what you do, it actually is an application of life to math to real world. And that's one of the things that helps you think to make that connection, to get that STEM education for our economy.
Yeah, and that's what, and I represent the industry. So our industry is the connected technology sector, Internet of Things, AI, AR, VR, all of the sensor technology, voice, video, data security, life safety, thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of open positions right now. So what we're always trying to do, we have a program within our industry called Ignite, sparking your interest in technology. What we struggle with is to think about at what level, at what age that we can start connecting those dots. What we have learned is it starts off with curiosity, right? So we've discovered, and you educators know this better than anyone, is that where do we take a curiosity, a natural curiosity of a young person, and how do we turn that into start thinking about a career that could evolve from that curiosity? We think about inspiration. We think about, who or what has inspired you, and then how do you tap into that? How do you find the passion in that young person to take it into something great, something very successful? Where we struggle is we have always thought of STEM, I think, and STEM students as the ones that aren't college bound, 4-year college bound. We got to fix that somehow, right? So we have to figure out, okay, with these awesome jobs that we have wide open for people coming into our industry, how do we reach them to let them know that they can be that great math student, that great science student? They don't have to be the ones that are taking the very basic math, the very basic science just to get through to go learn a trade or learn a skill. We want them all, right? So we want students that achieve high levels of math and science. We want students that are medium and on the lower end as well. So we got to figure out, where do we close that gap? How do we make that connection to what is something that could be an awesome career for someone, and do it at an earlier age, I think, and figure out how do we build that curriculum earlier to tap into, not compress their curiosity, but to really embrace it, I guess.
Ricketts, you're on the ground floor. You know all of that's just right in your wheelhouse there. How do you continue to go ahead and focus and get that motivation early enough so that it makes a difference?
Well, number one, starting off at the cradle, the parents are the child's first teachers. But when they come in my classroom, and I teach pre-K through 5th grade on the elementary level, so I see them all. Hands-on. Science is hands-on and it's real world, and they love it. And I know my principal's here, and I'm afraid to say this, but I've got the best job at that school, and I don't want her to move me, but it takes materials, it takes teacher training. We have the head of elementary science here and her cohort who trains us, and you can't do it without teaching training teachers. But once you get them hooked, once they start separating things that are magnetic and non-magnetic and solving real world problems, I'll give you an example. We did a lab when there was a big oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Do you remember that?
Every year.
Yeah, every year, just about. And so they're watching it on TV, and they were consumed by it. So I'm saying, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity. So we brought in oil in the lab, and it was messy, and we found different ways to soak up the oil and different methods without harming the environment, and they were so into it. Chemistry, physics, life science, all wrapped up into one. Now, granted, it was a mess, but they were researching it and using, technology and math all in one. These subjects weren't siloed. It wasn't just science or just technology or just engineering or just math. It was integrated. But the best part of it was, a month later, and I didn't know this, the reading teacher on the 5th grade level found some passages on oil spills and how to clean them up. So before they even read the passage, the children had so much prior knowledge, so much background knowledge, knew the vocabulary, that they just tore into it. And she had the highest scores on that passage. So much so that they were writing about it. And these are children whose first language is not English, or they might be SPED or whatever, but you meet them at their need and work up with them, and that's where that equity comes in. But once you do it, it's like a concert, and all the instruments are just playing together in the symphony. It's great.
But you brought up a word, relevant, right? It has to be relevant.
That's right.
And Chuck talked about the same thing, and he said things like, the stuff that he's talking about. We're talking about sensors, artificial intelligence, machine language, automation, and this is terminology that communities and kids don't even know. So we have to, what Chuck was saying, really push it down and have this become a part of their vernacular, so it becomes just an expectation, right? And that's what we're not doing. And I admire what Ms. Ricketts is doing, because that's what all teachers have to have. They have to be allowed to do it. And a lot of times in educational systems, they have a fixed curriculum and put teachers in a box, and they can't make it relevant. But then, having the courage to step outside of that and say, this is how, this is how kids learn, and this is how I'm gonna do it. So we have to free up teachers to be teachers again, to engage kids where they are with materials that otherwise get the kids interested.
No, I think we need to think about one other thing too, because it's so encouraging to hear about all these great stories and these great approaches, these great teachers we have, the kind of programs that Calvin has. But somehow we're still not getting those people into those jobs. We still can't find people to do it. And I think we have to recognize there's a little bit of something about our culture that could help us do this. A kid who grows up and touches a football, he wants to be a football player. If he touches a computer, he doesn't necessarily want to be a STEM guy. So we need to make sure that being a STEM person is cool. Mm-hmm. And I used to think that if people knew how rich you could get from being a technology person, that really ought to get their attention. But
I agree with that.
And you look up, but you've got Bill Gates and you've got Steve Jobs, you've got all these people who have gotten rich. People know that you can get rich. I think what they may not know, and I don't know this for sure, but they may not know that I could do that too, or I could at least be part of that. And so I'd like to see some way where, even outside the schools, our culture as a whole would start to think that nerds are kind of cool. And maybe you could have a movie about a nerd.
Rick, look, I agree with that 100. But in his book, The World is Flat.
I read that too.
What's his name?
I was the only person who read it.
And The World is Flat. Yeah. He said, when you go to China, Bill Gates is a superstar. Yeah. Kids line up along the street to see Bill Gates. But in America, they line up to see Britney Spears and Madonna, right? Now, based on the challenges they're having, I don't mean to, to slam or shade them, but the bottom line is that I agree with you wholeheartedly that there's something amiss in our culture that sell our kids a pipe dream that otherwise, the pipe dream that we are selling our kids minimize their ability to achieve when other countries are selling their kids a pipe dream that has amazing opportunity.
Now, let me just say one more thing, because I think that's totally right. I also think, though, it's, it's a problem that comes with some good things. Our culture has lots of things available to people. I mean, the only way out of poverty in the United States is not necessarily STEM. There's lots of things they could do. And so when I was in Congress, we worried a lot about that. What can we spend money on that would actually produce some real results? And of course, in Congress, we never figured it out. They very rarely do. But one thing that I'd like to, and this is just an idea, but you could finance some movies or some music or some things that would be widely disseminated that would show STEM graduates or STEM experts in a positive light. And I would like to see somebody take that on, because if there's a lot of good things to say there. It is a path to a lot of prosperity for people, and so if we could make it cool, it would be good.
One interesting.
I'm cool, Rick. I want you to know that.
Yeah. Well, you're cool, but I'm not. That's the point. I'm trying to get people to be cool.
One of the things that we did, and I recognize this is the elementary level, but for junior achievement, I brought a team of a continuum of healthcare professionals in to meet kids in the classroom. And it wasn't just doctors, because the problem is that kids don't recognize the array of things that they can do. And so I brought in some medical assistants. I brought in a phlebotomist. I brought in an x-ray tech, brought in a billing and coding person. And I showed them this is all part of this, our universe, our industry. And I think that some of that exposure just maybe doesn't happen as much as we need it to happen.
Really good idea.
I love what she said about exposure and getting them early and often, because mentoring minds matter. And what we're talking about, I don't think mentoring and getting people in schools who have these jobs is a new idea. But what they really need to see are students or people in professions who look like them, who come from their backgrounds, exposing them to worlds that they may not have never ever known. My dad is a retired engineer, mechanical engineer, and he came to speak to my students one time. The 30 minutes he spent with my students far outpassed any movie, any book, any toy, and we have Hidden Figures out there, and it's a great movie. If you haven't seen it, see it. But that exposure and that relationship lets them understand what STEM is, what it can be, and how they can see themselves in STEM. And self-actualization is a powerful tool. Once they start seeing people who look like them in these roles, in these jobs, there is a switch that's flipped. And they start, so I really do want to encourage the different types of engineers here, the different types of STEM professions here. You know, go get a part of a program, visit these schools, have sustained relationships so they can see people who look like us doing these jobs, and then they start realizing, hey, I could do that too.
I just really want to underscore that is absolutely true, and it's something that we really focus on as well, where we bring in people from all ages and walks of life who work in the space program in different ways, and very similarly, where you've got flight controllers, you have people who work in food service that are all advancing space exploration. But also really important to see people who look like them, right? That they can visualize themselves in those roles. One story we love to share is there's someone who is now the IT specialist for astronauts who actually started out as a DJ and really was not a high achiever in school, met someone who worked at Johnson Space Center and wanted to impress her. And she said, you've got to get serious in life if we're going to get serious as a couple.
Another way to do it, yeah.
And so that was a motivator for him. But
So you're saying love is a motivator.
That's right. That's one thing we've overlooked in STEM, I think.
But he actually went on to study information technology and was able to get a job there and work his way up in the organization. So there are lots of paths. But I think the point, but I really agree with everything everyone has said here, is having role models in different types of people. We work with Emerge, which is a group of engineers and scientists at Johnson Space Center under the age of 30. And so they're very relatable to the kids, and they come in and participate in our programs. We do a Women in STEM, and we make sure that we have a great representation of women from different backgrounds who tell their life stories, and they're not linear. They didn't necessarily start out in elementary school and say, oh, I'm going to become a flight controller or I'm going to become an engineer, but have pursued many different paths. And so I think it's important for kids to hear that you have to explore and pursue with that higher goal in mind.
So I'm sorry. I'll give you one example. I grew up in a house. My dad was a roofer. My son grew up in a house. His dad is a PhD. Mother is a pharmacist. If my son say, hey, I need an engineer in my class, I go, you need a pharmacist. Mother goes. If he say, I need an astronaut, I call my friend Dr. Jeanette Epps. I mean, if you need a doctor, I call my friend Dr. Breeze, right? But what about the kids on the other side of town? They don't have that type of access to those people who have achieved. So it's more than just seeing. And when we start talking about role modeling, there's a lot of times like you all come in so they can see you. No, we have to marshal the resources and the technology and the human resources back into those communities so those kids can see, touch, and feel people that look like them, who otherwise don't look like them, and know that they can be you too. And this is the part of the commercial. So on Saturdays, we have these programs, and Duran is here. Duran works the line group, and that's how I get here because he used to volunteer. We marshal volunteers. We've created a pathway because I don't judge people intentions. I don't judge people actions because I believe everybody got the right intentions, but we have to create a pathway for people to give back. So what we've done is that we've created a pathway where people can give back that's efficient, effective, and impactful. The kids win and the professionals win. The professionals go home and the kids standing there like, I met a real engineer today and maybe I can be that too.
It's fascinating. About 25 years ago, I was speaking to a graduating class at a magnet engineering school in Miami. And for that, I did research on engineering. I had no idea how much engineering. So I told my daughter, who at that time was going to be going to high school, I said, honey, this would be great because I looked at how much they could make as a father. Honey, this would be great for you. You're getting A's in calculus and physics and all that kind of stuff. She said, I don't really want to do that. What? Well, I said, I get A's because I think you and mommy want me to get A's. I don't really like it. So I said, okay, we got to stimulate these kids to be excited about this. And it's a matter of being exposed and being excited and know that they can gain things out of that. 65% of those with bachelor's degrees in STEM earn more than master's degrees, folks with master's degrees. So 47% of bachelor's degrees in STEM earn more than PhDs in non-STEM occupations. So that should get them fired up as well. We have somebody from LinkedIn who actually has a question. I'm excited about that because that's social media. LinkedIn actually with a question, which actually goes into our next area, which is talking about equity in STEM education. Because it's one thing to talk about STEM. It's one thing to say we all need to do it. But if it's not equitable in allowing everybody to do it, it's a whole different ballgame. So Joe on LinkedIn asks, do you believe there needs to be an equal focus on blue-collar, vocational STEAM careers as well as academic? Kind of equity.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Why
are you looking at me? Yeah, let's think about that a second. So the world of systems integration that I live in, the connected technologies, our connected world. The teachers here, more than anyone, know all about our video conferencing capabilities. Our members were busier than ever this last year equipping your hybrid classrooms, your blended classroom. I don't know what you think, but I have a feeling that's going to be here to stay. I think the classroom isn't what it used to be. Somebody's got to pull that wire in. Somebody's got to mount these devices. That projector just didn't fly up there on the ceiling, right? So we have just as big a gap, shortage of labor force in that realm as we do the programmers, the commissioning agents, the engineers, designers, and everything. So from every level in the world of technology and connectability of devices, we need help all the way through that. There's amazing jobs all the way through. You might have to get on a ladder on a few jobs. You might have to get a little bit dirty on some of them, but maybe that's what people like. Maybe they want that trade or that skill as well. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, and there's no end in sight. When we look at, like, our worlds are colliding, medicine and technology is colliding, telehealth, telemedicine, the distance learning, if you will. So every one of our industries are going to be bound by the world of connectivity, right?
Mhm.
So we have this amazing, I think, intersection that we're starting to see now that gives us so many more capabilities, and trying to connect with these people is the hard thing. We tried, and again, for the educators, you'll probably hate me saying this, but we tried gamification of some of the applications and stuff, and what we got was kids just staring at their phones even more than they were. I invented a term called doom scrolling, which is what, I don't know if you've ever heard that term before, but it's a term where I look at these young people and they're just staring at their phone and they're looking at their social media and all that. So our gamification initiative to try to meet them where they were at, it didn't work for us. So
You're chomping at the bit.
I'm curious
I
about your opinions on this.
Oh, you want
Yeah.
my, you want
I
my
want to hear what you have to say.
Okay.
I want to know.
Okay.
And again,
Um,
they probably all hate me.
I feel, the question about, STEM degrees and STEM jobs that don't need degrees and vocational training. As an educator, I like to give options to all my students. But it's a sensitive issue with me because I know historically
Boom.
that sometimes not everyone has the best of intentions, and STEM has been used to segregate. And we're going to let this population
Yeah.
and train them and push them on a track toward these STEM high paying jobs. And these children over here, we can let you be the electricians and plumbers and stuff. And not to degrade or put down anybody's profession, but when you are using it as a segregational tool and to hurt children and to limit their options, you have created a glass ceiling, and now you've created an equity issue, almost a social justice issue. And so I'm very particular about that. Having said that, I do think those options need to be there and fairly, given. Oh, okay, how do I say this?
I see it.
Wait, hold on, hold on.
We just had this conversation.
Because maybe not all my students will go to college, but I would rather them have the technical skills of being an electrician than working at a fast food joint, and not to put down fast food joints. This is a better option than that. This is a better option, and maybe they can use that electrician job as a jumping off or as a platform to getting a degree. But the fact that it has been how it's been historically used, it kind of gets to me. Not to say that it's not equally as important in our STEM ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I said that was a loaded question. All right. And the question is loaded in a dichotomy of two choices when it's really not two choices, because it's the spectrum, right? And we have to give our kids, in the 21st century, our children are only going to have three options. Either they're going to take something, break something, and or make something. If we don't give them the education and skills to make something like make a living, make a life, make a difference, that only leaves them with the two choices that we see on the news every night. Now, the challenge is, and Chuck knew in his training, and he kind of hinted at it, we started having this conversation about, well, they don't need to take this math and that math. And to do the jobs that we consider trade now, you need to have that math. I mean, if you go get a certification and you go do different things, you still need about as much education as someone who's decided to go to a four-year college. And then when we start talking about the equity piece, we know how this has been played out and how it's still been played out. Education is the only industry. It's the only industry where we don't take the so-called best and put on the most challenging problem. I bet you I can go to school in Houston right now and they say that's the best school. And they claim it's the best teachers. And I say, well, okay, let's take these teachers from this best school and send them over here where we have the most challenges, and everybody will go to screaming. But if one of our kids get busted in the head, we'll get on the internet and we are trying to find the best neurosurgeon to take care of our kid. So when we start talking about equity, that question speaks to the lack of equity in resources and a lack of equity in how we approach the problems that's before us, and America is suffering for it.
Do you solve that by getting more alliant groups to support, to fund, to energize, to create, to support the kind of programs that we're all talking about here? You talk about cradle, you got to start early, but what happens to those kids once they realize, I need this math, and now I've left it behind. Now I'm behind. Now it's a struggle. Now it's an embarrassment to be left behind. It's a real challenge to get them to be able to move forward in that. And so the question is, great ideas, how does it get funded? How does it happen?
Is funding part of what you're talking about? Or is it more, is the solution to your question really something like, let's have a school that's technology oriented and anybody can get in if they have a competitive criteria to get in? Maybe that's not it. But you were saying, if we were trying to find the best neurosurgeon around, we'd know how to do that. How can a kid who's good at STEM, but doesn't necessarily have a lot of opportunities available, how can they find a place where they can develop that talent? Is it
Question number one
school?
is, how do I know I'm good at STEM if STEM is not even in my school?
Yeah.
So in America, I would never take money off the table. It's a capitalistic society. It's funny when we start talking about solving these problems, it's not a capitalistic problem now. We're only talking about this problem because it's a capitalistic problem. And Duvall is my dude. I don't know if that's illegal, if that's allowable to say. I mean, but this is what we need. It's a all hands on approach. We are separate as the fingers, but as whole as the hand. We got people making gazillions of dollars and not pouring resources back to trying to solve the problem to sustain their own industry. And I'm not a government. I'm not talking about government.
Yeah,
all right. Now we can talk about government, but I'm talking about the people who are making gazillions of dollars, and they're not even taking an approach to try to solve their own problem. And I'm talking about definitely we could talk about Silicon Valley because they're making gazillions of dollars.
Yeah, well, let's talk about them for just 1 second because, the good thing about it is now the one thing they are doing is creating some jobs. And the problem we're having is connecting the people, who could do those because they can't find people to do that. That's why they get them from Korea and every place. So I think it's the middle ground that you're really trying to find. Providing jobs is a good thing. And
providing jobs is a good thing. But when you make a gazillion of dollars, maybe you need to train the people to take those jobs. There used to be a time in education when education wasn't about training people to do jobs. Education used to be about training people so they can be good citizens. And it was the corporation's job to train their good citizens and workers to do the jobs that they want. Now, you're hearing this from an engineer, right? I mean, that was the case. I mean, Ford and everybody else had training centers. And when you got hired by Ford took you and put you in a 6-month training program, a 9-month apprenticeship program, and Ford paid for you to learn what you needed to do, to do what Ford wanted you to do. But now all of a sudden, corporations want schools to create workers.
I'm gonna take you up on that one. I might say something kind of unpopular, but I'm hiring a lot of people, and I was just telling the story. One of my technology folks came to me and said, I just found the coolest program. You're gonna love this program. It's a software program that translates anything that we want to put in as an input into whatever grade level we want it to translate it into. so we can translate our emails. And so as part of this project, I went ahead and grade leveled our average technologist who's like in our clinics, right? These are people who are taking care of Houston's community. And their grade level for reading was a 4. And so these are all kids that have graduated high school for sure. Some of them have associate's degrees. And if we are, if that's what I'm getting as a business owner, yeah, you're right. I got to train, but I shouldn't have to train them how to read. Like,
I agree with
you
that.
know, and so we've got to insist that some basic, so kids can't get pushed up through this and then end up where they don't even understand what they're supposed to do. So it's a problem. I don't actually have a solution. I'm just putting it out there because it was something that just came out this week, and it hurt my heart to imagine kids going all the way through their education and coming out with a 4th grade reading level.
Well, and that problem's been around for a long time. Much like you talked about this cycle of challenges, whether it be the computer industry now, STEM industry. But the problem that we're talking about has to do with something that's been around for a long time as well. And we talked about that earlier. That's the achievement gap, which has been in place and still is in place. And I'm not sure, and I don't know who's got the answer for that. I know there are a lot of answers, but the solutions aren't in place to make that reality. So
You're not really unique to STEM either. I mean, so it goes across.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But as it relates to STEM, it's more glaring in a way because if you don't have the 4th grade or beyond comprehension to read, to understand the STEM, then that's a problem. That's why we're great to have teachers like Ms. Ricketts who's taking those pre-Ks and teaching them the things they need to learn at an early age going forward. So when you have it at Space Center Houston, you want to have people who come to you have the education they need to have the jobs that they need, correct?
Oh, absolutely. But I think one of the issues, and we're saying this too, is that there's been a declining investment in education, in public education in the country, where in the past we invested significantly in public education, and you didn't think about, oh, I don't want my kids to go to that school because it's not a good school, or I'll send them to private school if I have the resources. So you have this growing to kind of split in people who have resources who can really invest. And we have 15 or 20% of the kids in this region who are high performing and doing great, but then the other 60% are really challenged. And it's not providing teachers with adequate resources for training and latest classroom techniques that they can use in instruction. And so I think to me, that's a big part of the problem, is that there needs to be a greater, and it's a whole society challenge. We all have to embrace it. And so it is companies like Alliant Group who are really stepping up, and many others need to do the same to ensure that we improve the quality of education.
But our country has done this before. Look at World War II. Look how we all came together when there was a clarion call, and all the industry of America jumped on the bandwagon, and we went from 0 to 60 overnight. Look what we did with the space race when the Soviet Union was beating us, hands down, going to space, and we need more rockets and engineers, and we were tons of resources into our economy. So we have a precedent of that before. We can do it again if the need is there, if the will is there, if the inclination is there, and really build this STEM ecosystem, private sector, public sector, museums, teachers, education, all working together as one. It's been done before and we can do it again.
But let me just say one thing about that, because both of those things were kind of government directed, which can be good. You can do some great things. But the solution to this problem is people like you. It's people like you being empowered to do all the things you need to do and supported. And so, a lot of that is financial, but there are things other than financial that need to be done. And I'm not exactly sure how you do them, but it's not just a matter of, a big federal program saying, by golly, we're going to do this and get everything on board and here's a bunch of money. There's some other things that have to happen, and I'm not quite sure what they are. You probably know better than I do what they are.
But I do want to caution us against just throwing everything on the educational system.
That's it.
It's everybody. And that's education's problem. Let's go about it. No, it's the private sector too. It's businesses too. If we don't work together along with education, it's not going to get solved.
I want to add, people see the glory, but they don't know the story. I got 4 STEM degrees, BS in math, BS, MS, and PhD in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech. and that's gangster.
Pop the collar. Pop the collar.
But people get blown away when I tell them that I grew up in a house with no books, and I started college in remedial reading and developmental mathematics. I was one of those kids.
I'm blown away.
I was one of those kids that came out.
That's awesome.
And I defend my teachers because they pushed me as far as they could push me with what was given to them,
But they have.
with what they had. I mean, I've had teachers move me 2 grades, but if I was in a 4th grade and I was on a 2nd grade level, and this 4th grade teacher took me to the 4th grade, so that's a bad teacher? So there are parts that are missing in there. I walked up on Morehouse College campus, and the teacher called me doctor, and I couldn't even spell PhD. But Morehouse had things in place to restore the hope in my heart, and then a pathway for me to get to where I needed to be. Now we're just saying, let's throw them away. You know, if they're not there, and it's not even, you know, I was telling Chuck, I toured Iowa speaking, you know, and when a black man get invited to tour Iowa to speak, you know, we got some problems.
Or he's running for president. That's the other thing.
That's right. I should have ran. So,
Okay.
so this is this is cross-cultural, cross-racial, and it really boils down to 2 things. Whether you grew up in a house with money or whether you grew up in a house without money. If you grew up in poverty, you got about a 7% chance of attending a 4-year college.
Say that again.
If you grew up in poverty, you got about a 7% chance.
7.
7. That we say in the hood, 7. You got about a 7% chance of going to a 4-year college and graduating with a degree. And I don't, you know, until we solve this poverty issue in the richest country in the world, we're going to continue to have these circular conversations. And we always going to find somebody to point to. We need more you, or we need more you, when we won't point to the monster in the room called poverty.
And this brings us to a really a bigger question as STEM and education as a social justice tool, a tool for social justice. And recently there was a civil rights icon, lesser known, and I really didn't know much about him, Bob Moses, who at 86 just died this past week. Was he taught at Bedford-Stuyvesant and was Harvard trained, yeah. And he would sign up. He went to the South, signed up voters during the civil rights era, got beaten and bloodied in stitches, and then years later became initiated the what's it called, the Algebra Project?
The Algebra Project.
The Algebra Project. And he said, and this in his obit really got me. He equated STEM and teaching STEM to children who don't have STEM to voting rights.
Math literacy.
Math literacy to voting rights, and put them on the same level. And this is coming from a man who was beaten trying to get people to vote. So that really lets you know this is a bigger problem or bigger issue than just STEM.
And it indicates that STEM is just one part of our society that has all the challenges and problems of our society, and has a number of solutions to get it solved. I mean, there are a lot of things that have to be done. Final comment, starting with you.
We're in the middle of a pandemic, and I was waiting for the athletes and entertainers to come up with that vaccine. I was waiting for the politicians to come up with that vaccine. I was waiting on the lawyers. I'm like, come on, man, can't you just write me a brief and cure me? I mean, I was waiting on the rich people, you know, going to the moon and all to come up with that vaccine. No, we had a whole world waiting on STEM to save them.
Amen.
That's how important this is.
Amen.
That's how important it is. We was waiting on people who have sacrificed and worked in labs without any attention, without any billboards, who are not cool, who don't get invited to stuff like this. And we were praying every night, please do something. Maybe some of us, you know what I mean, was praying. But we was waiting on STEM to save us. And I promise you, this ain't gonna be the last time.
Nope.
This ain't gonna be the last time. And I'm in this battle because if somebody making a vaccine, I want somebody like me at that lab too. I'm doing this because if somebody in there discussing how they're going to distribute the vaccine or who's going to get it, I need somebody like me in there. You know, I'm doing this because I need somebody who they deciding what's going to get funded for the vaccine. I need somebody like me up in there. That's tomorrow. That is the world in which we are going into. And that's why it got to be STEM for all, because we don't know where the genius is. And that's why college coaches go to all the high schools and recruit. They don't go to, just one. They don't go to that high school. Oh, they go to every high school because they don't know where the genius is. And we got to support STEM at all the schools, at all levels, because we don't know where the genius is. We don't know who's going to be the next Dr. Corbett to come up with NRA, whatever, vaccine and save an entire planet. That's what's before us.
Doctor?
Well, I don't even know how I can follow that. Of course, I mean, just to state the obvious, it was actually kind of interesting because, you have a great graphic that shows what's happening in our country in regards to STEM. Amazing growth in these industries. The things that actually the live entertainment sector isn't even on the chart because we're all going to a digital world. We're going to, digital health technologies and self-driving cars and all of the things that are about to come into our future. That's all STEM. And so if our kids aren't really excited about then some other kids somewhere else are going to be excited about it, and all these jobs are going to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And we really need to embrace it, embrace our future, recognize what the future is, and then give our kids a gentle push in the right direction.
Wilson?
Yeah, my thought on all this, and this has been fascinating, first of all, but my thing is, we got to work together. Education, educators, and industry have to work together, because if you think about it, with the advancement in technology, is that the things that we're learning and doing today are going to be obsolete in no time. So the life cycle of technology is just collapsing like crazy. So I wonder if we could do a better job as an industry to help you realize what type of technology we should be teaching towards. Like, what do the jobs of the future look like? Coding was a big thing, right? So if you think about coding, and so many STEM programs focus on teaching kids how to code. Machine learning and AI do the coding for it. Robotics, machine learning. So it's been called the hamburger flipping of the future, right? So we're teaching a skill that may not be relevant in the world of machine learning and AI, right? So what we've got to do is we've got to work together for this country to be strong, and the country to be connected and united. Is we've got to work together to make sure that what we're teaching at appropriate grade levels ties into what the occupations and the skill sets and the needs are in the future. And that's going to be a massive challenge. I don't know how we predict it, like I've got all the data and the research, but how do I translate that into what can be a curriculum that a school could approve in a short order when the curriculum development cycles are a massive undertaking, right?
That's right.
Point. Why?
Oh yeah, I see two things. I think, number one, the vaccine was important. It required lots of great STEM people, but it also required lawyers to have the rights. So it was good, or rich people to have invested that money. So you had companies that were ready to do something. It required politicians to make sure that the rights were in place and everyone understood what their role had to be. So
we call that necessary but insufficient in STEM.
You're absolutely right, but it wasn't going to go any place without the money either. Mm-hmm. So I'm just saying, this is a thing where society as a whole has to get together and has to recognize, as you say, the crucial importance of STEM people, and it has to be not just people like us who care about it a lot, but everyday people. And then the other thing I would say is, we've talked a lot, and you made a really good point that it's a lot of the problems of society are having an impact on our STEM problem, like they have an impact on a lot of other things. And, we got a lot of people trying to solve those problems, and I hope someday we'll solve them, but we don't want to wait. We can't just wait and say we're going to change America and that'll solve the STEM problem. We got to focus on what we can do specifically in our own individual areas to solve the STEM problem. And, hopefully some of these other things will also get solved. And that's why I like your point, Chuck, and also what Alliant Group does. They're not out there trying to preach to the world that you got to be, you got to get religion and do. They're just finding some great STEM teachers, giving some incentive, and trying to move things a little bit in the right direction in their particular corner of the world. That's what you're doing, and yours is actually has the potential to reach out to a lot of different places. So all I'm saying is, yeah, we got some problems in our society. They're having an impact on STEM, but let's not focus on that. Let's find out what we can do in our own little place and try to move the ball forward. And I guess I say one other thing, it's not the government that solves this problem. We've seen it too many times. They can help. You've got to have a really good idea, and maybe they'll give you some money if you're lucky. But a lot of it will be wasted before it gets to you. But that's where the action is. And I think we've got some people here who seem to be moving in the right direction.
Final thought,
thank
Mr.
God
Harris.
hold on. I thank God for the government because I'm Dr. Mackey with a PhD and I was funded by the National Science Foundation.
Yeah.
I don't know if the National Science Foundation didn't have the funding to fund minority scholars, would I be sitting here as Dr. Mackey?
Yeah, it can do some good things.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what I would add, incredible conversation and discussion. What I see is we really have to support teachers in coaching kids and being resilient and adaptable, because you kind of look at how things have accelerated in the last 100 years. It's absolutely remarkable how quickly things are changing. And the skill that's going to be most important is adaptability, that you have the aptitude and the ability to adapt to new opportunities and as things evolve. And I love the analogy of the hamburger flipping with coding, because it's absolutely true.
That's it.
And so
Really,
it's sustaining that curiosity, that inquisitiveness, the ability to persevere through a problem, to work through it, to really strengthen those skills so that you can adapt to new opportunities and take advantage of them over time. Because in 30 years, the world's going to be completely different from what we know now or what we imagined it to be.
So, you've already had your
Oh, I
final
have my-
thoughts.
okay,
Yes.
well, no
No, I'm just
parting
kidding.
words? I was going to say, my parting words are pass the collection plate and the communion cups. 'Cause
Amen.
we just at church.
Amen. Amen. Can the ushers get to the back door, please? Some of you will get that.
we
So,
need more line groups.
Yeah.
well, absolutely,
Amen.
absolutely. And
Amen.
government does have a role to play. When it works well. Obviously, we've potholes like crazy, roads falling apart, and we may be close to getting an infrastructure deal in place after talking about it for an eon. So government can work, though. That's a good thing. And by the way, from this, I'm more inspired. My 18-month-old granddaughter, I got to get her phone. She knows how to use the phone already. And so now I have to get her the phone program with STEM stuff so she can take care of Papa. Thank you all for being here. I hope you've been inspired by this conversation today. This is a great idea, Aligned Group, for doing this, a great opportunity to get together and talk about some of the challenges we kind of know are there, but giving us incentive on ways that we can probably solve some of these things. So we thank you for coming here today. Congratulations to all the teachers for what you've been able to do here. Please leave your name badges on the tables when you get ready to leave, because we use them again. It's a good thing. And folks will be outside to help you down the elevators and get to where you need to go. Don't have to worry about getting out of the garage. You'll be able to do that. So we're not going to keep you here for the rest of the day. And you also have goodie bags as you part. So goodie bags for you. I don't know where they're going to be. They're probably right outside on the way by the elevators. Lion Group does it great. Don't they do a good job? Give a Lion Group a big round of applause. Casey, you're amazing. You're still my favorite meteorologist. I want you to know that. Thank you, everybody. Be safe as you travel. Good luck to you in the next year ahead. And my heart, I'm the first one in my family not to be a teacher, and I'm not proud of that. I just want you to know that. Congratulations to all you teachers for what you do. Thank you. Thank you very much. Enjoyed it very much.
Thank you very much.
You're amazing as always. Thank you so much.